Today, we're going to have our very last video on math, and we're going to be covering a subject that has to do with fractions, but it's one of the more challenging parts of fractions. So I'm going to try to explain it in several different ways, and then we'll try to practice a few. So this lesson is about comparing fractions. So what we're going to be doing, this is skipping to chapter 17, lesson 1, and we're going to be doing pages 327 and 328, which is just the first 2 pages of that chapter. So we'll take a look at it. I think you'll enjoy it. Today is May 22nd, Friday. Like I said, this is our last day of teaching math, our last day of me teaching you math fractions. So, we're going to talk first about what a fraction is. So this is kind of review. Of course, we've talked about it before. So this is a pizza. And if you'll notice, it looks like someone's been eating this pizza. So this pizza is now split in half. Originally, it was one whole pizza. And it was separated into 2 parts. And this part right here that is still a pizza is 1/2. The way we write that fraction is the word 1 and the word half. H-A-L-F. As you can see, the fraction over there, I would write it like this: 1 on top and 2 on the bottom. Now, when we compare fractions, which is what our lesson is all about today, one of the things that's important for us to remember is that when we're looking at a fraction, we're actually technically looking at a division problem, because we're saying one whole pizza is being divided into 2 parts. And you guys remember, because we just finished multiplication and division, so you guys remember when you multiply something, you make it get larger. So if I said the number 2 as a factor and the number 3 as a factor, and then I'm going to multiply those together, I'm going to get 6, which is larger than both of my factors. So that when I take this fraction 1/2 and I say it's a division problem, what I'm saying is that we started out with a large number. Remember, divide, we start out with a large number and then we split it into equal parts, right? Well, that's what a fraction is too. I'm taking one pizza, but I'm dividing it into 2 parts. So having that concept or that idea in mind, that it's one thing divided into 2, is important. And you're going to understand when I go to the next slide. Okay, this is 1/4. 1/4, if we compared that with our other fraction of 1/2, and someone said to you, which is larger, 1/4 or 1/2? Now you might be able to envision this in your mind and say, I know that for sure. 1/4 of a pizza is smaller than 1/2 of a pizza. In fact, I can see from this picture right here that half of a pizza actually contains 2/4, and that's going to be an important concept down the road. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit tricky, and sometimes people struggle a little bit. Because when you're comparing the numbers 1/4 and 1/2, let me get us a blank page. When we're comparing these 2 numbers, if someone were to say which one is bigger without us being able to really picture those 2 fractions, and we look at this, one of the things that seems a little odd is that the number 4 is bigger than the number 2. So you might say, well, I know 4 is bigger than 2, so this must be the larger fraction. Now, if you can keep in your mind that there was one pizza, and every time we slice it an additional time, we're making all those slices smaller, right? Especially when we're talking about unit fractions, because the ones are on the top. 1/4 compared to 1/2, I have one pizza split into 4 parts, or one pizza split into 2 parts. So what you have to remember is the smaller the number on the bottom, as long as the numbers on the top stay the same, the smaller the number on the bottom, the bigger slice of pizza you get. So really, technically, of course, this is true. 1/2 is definitely bigger than 1/4. And you saw it when the pizza was up there, because we talked about it at length. Okay? So let's look at another example. What I have here is 2 strips of paper that are the same size. One is split into 2 equal parts, right? But the other one is split into 3 equal parts. So in this situation, and just forget about that 1/4 over there, we're comparing 1/2 with 1/3. So the question is, which is bigger? 1/2 or 1/3? Now remember what we talked about, that bottom number represents how many slices of pizza there are. So this is one whole pizza split into 2 parts, or one whole pizza split into 3 parts. Which is the bigger slice of pizza? Remember, the smaller the number, the bigger the slice of pizza. So of course we have this, and I'll scoot them so they're a little closer together, right? We have this section right here compared with this section right here. And it's obvious to see that 1/2 is definitely bigger than 1/3. And we have these 2 strips of paper are definitely the same size pieces of paper. Obviously our fractions are different, and what we're saying is this one is bigger than that one. So that's just another way to look at it, and we're not talking about pizza. So now let's look at one more. There's 1/8. Now what if we were to compare 1/8 with 1/4? Technically, 1/4 of the pizza is going to be all of this section right here. 1/8 of the pizza is just that one yellow slice, or the missing part. So, which is bigger, 1/4 or 1/8? Now you might immediately look at that and say 8 is bigger than 4, so that means this one's bigger. This means there's 8 slices. This means there's 4 slices. And in this case, this fraction is twice as big. So if we were to put the compare symbol, we would have to go like this. 1/8 is less than 1/4. So now we've compared several different times using unit fractions. But we're going to give you one more way to look at it. Okay, so that's the first page that you should have in your packet. This is chapter 17, lesson 1. The page number is 327. You can use fraction strips, just like we have right here, to compare the fractions 1/2 and 1/3, which is what we just did. When you make halves, how many parts make the whole? 2. So we're going to put 2 right here. And it talks about the fraction strip on Learning Tool 21, which we don't have, and that's understood. But you just take a strip of paper, color one part 1/2. And what I did was I had strips of paper, I folded it in half to make that right there. And then I folded a similar sized piece of paper in thirds to make this strip right here. So compare the colored parts of the fraction strips to compare the fractions. So this top one is 1/2. Notice it's one strip divided into two sections, and this half right here is shaded. To this one, which is the same size strip, but only 1/3 is shaded. So the answer is 1/2, as we said a moment ago, is larger than 1/3. How do fraction strips help you compare fractions? And I'm going to say you can definitely see which is bigger. Otherwise, when you just talk about it or you have to think about the numbers, it's not quite as visual. So that's what I'm seeing for my answer. If you wanted to answer it a little differently, that's fine. That's up to you. But we're going to go ahead. Now, if you really want to get challenged, especially over the summer, you could go ahead and do some more practice work on comparing fractions. These are some excellent videos, and this first one is Khan Academy, and they're explaining about comparing fractions. And they do it much more quickly than I do. So now we're going to go to your last page of math for the year, page 328. We might go through this kind of quickly, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick, which you might like, but I can tell you that it always works. Okay, so right here, what they have is 1/2 compared to 2/3. And they said, wait a minute, those 2/3 are definitely bigger than 1/2. So that is true, true, true. Now, if I look at number 3, they're both unit fractions, right? Because they both have a 1 on the top. And I can remember that rule that if the number is larger on the bottom, that means more slices of pizza, but each slice is smaller. So this is a small slice of pizza or 1/3 of the pizza. If you're really hungry, you might want to have that 1/3. So that's that one. Okay, these are unit fractions because they both have a 1 on the top, so I can remember that rule. 1/2 of the pizza or 1 pizza in 12 slices. Those slices are going to be pretty small. So once again, 1/2 is bigger. Number 5, again, it's unit fractions. So I can say a 4 is a smaller number than a 9. So then I know that 1/4 is going to be a bigger fraction. Another unit fraction, this is so nice. 1/3 compared with 1/8. Remember, 1 pizza split into 8 slices. So 1/3 is definitely going to be bigger. And then I have this interesting thing here. It says 1/2 compared to 4/8. Let me think about that for a second. Well, they're not unit fractions. 1/2 is, but 4/8 is not. Now, the nice thing that I can think about is that picture I saw of the pizza where there were 4 slices of pizza and there's 8 slices altogether in the pizza. But this says 4 on the top, 8 on the bottom. I can remember that 4 is half of 8. And I'll tell you something. If the number on top is half of the number on the bottom, that means that fraction is equal to 1/2. So that means this is equal. And if you think about it, you don't have to know everything about fractions to know this. If you're pretty good at multiplication and division, you'll be fine. Here's why. Because I have 8 slices in the entire pizza, and the shaded part, or the part that I'm talking about, is 4 of them. So that means 4 of them I'm not talking about, right? So if we were really doing the shading, 4 would be shaded, 4 would not be shaded. That's half. 4 is half of 8. So that's why those are equal. Okay, unit fraction, and we already compared these, right? 1/4 compared with 1/2. The answer, of course, is that 1/2 is going to be larger. Okay, so now we have two fractions that are not unit fractions that might be a little bit difficult for me to figure out. I'm going to write it big over here because I'm going to show you something. 2/12 is going to be compared to 1/4. Now, I'm going to teach you how to do this. When you get a little more into 3rd grade and definitely in 4th grade, your teacher's going to talk quite a bit about having something called a common denominator, meaning that I want to change these numbers and have them be the same. And you can change them, you can find equivalent fractions. But that's a whole lot of information about fractions that I'm not going to teach in the next 10 minutes. But I can show you how to get this answer every single time. And it's not a trick and it's not cheating. What it is skipping some of the steps for getting an equivalent denominator. Okay? So, the way I like to think about this is I think actually about what I do to keep a good spirit and to keep upbeat and cheerful. And that is, I refer back to the Bible verse that says, I believe it's Colossians chapter 4, verse 1, where it says, keep your eyes on heaven. Keep looking up. Keep looking up. God is up there. He's taking care of you. Keep your eyes on him. Don't let everything else get you distracted. Just keep your eyes on him, right? So what I do is I think about these numbers down here on the bottom, and I think about them continually looking up. This number right here is going to continually be looking up. Now you may look at that and go, okay, where is she going with this? I totally don't understand. No problem. Look at what I just made in the center. What symbol is that? It looks like times, doesn't it? So what I'm going to ask you to do, as you made those arrows pointing up, you're going to say 12 times 1, and you're going to put the answer here. And the answer is 12, right? And then I'm going to say 4 times 2. And you're going to put the answer right here, and the answer is 8. Now, what we did was we just did the multiplication that we would have to do if we actually got common denominators. You don't have to worry about that. I do want you to look at these two numbers, 8 and 12. Which is the bigger number? 12. Now, if that's true, then always, 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 the bigger number, as long as you're looking up, the bigger number says this is the larger fraction. I know right now it seems almost like magic to you. It's not. It's just you're skipping some steps. And it's the last day of math. We can skip a few steps. You'll learn it, I promise you. Anybody want to call me and have me figure it out and explain it to them? I will. But for right now, we used to call this crossing swords. But for our purposes, what we need to know is that 1/4 is bigger than 2/12. So we're going to try crossing swords on this one right here because we don't have unit fractions again. So we're going to say 8 times 1 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. And we're going to say that's bigger. Now, if you go back up here and remember that 1/2 is equal to 4/8, then of course 1/2 is smaller than 5/8 because that means it has one more 8. 1/8. Okay, so that makes sense anyway. Hey, we're almost done. 4 times 3 is 12. 9 times 3 is 27. So what I know from this is that that fraction on the left is much bigger. Okay, 6 times 2 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. Much bigger. And once again, we notice that this is 2/4, and we remember that 2/4 is 1/2, right? Is 1/2 smaller than 4/6? Yes. The reason we know is because 3/6 would be half. So there's 2 reasons why we know that's right. Okay, oh, you're gonna love this one. You guys, what did we talk about yesterday? 4/4 is equal to 1. It has to be equal to 1. This one is 8/9. It is not equal to 1. If it was equal to 1, it would be 9/9, right? So then we know that 1 is bigger than 8/9. It has to be. Okay? Oh, same thing once again. This is 2/2. 2/2 is 1 whole. 2/2 is definitely bigger than 7/8. Okay, so once again, we have the same number on the top, but different numbers on the bottom. So we're going to do our crossing swords again. 5 times 3 is 15. 4 times 3 is 12. So we know that 3/4 is bigger than 3/5. Last one. We have 3/12 and we have 1/4. You know, I have a sneaking suspicion that these are going to be very close, if not the same. Let's do our crossing swords. 12 times 1 is 12. 4 times 3 is also 12. Guess what? Those are equal. So now you have the answers. Like I said, if somebody wants to email me and ask me, how did you get this? I'd be glad to tell you. However, this is greater than sign. This is a really cute video. I hope you like it. On the very last slide, there's another video, and it explains all of this in a lot of detail. So, and I believe it is also Khan Academy or someone else that's very similar. So I think you're going to like that quite a bit. So there's only one other thing that we have to do on this last day of video lessons for math. The last time I will be teaching you math in the 2019-2020 school year. The last part of the lesson for today is IXL W.16, and I believe that's on comparing fractions, or I'm hoping it has something to do with fractions. If you didn't get a chance to watch my friends, the Numberjacks, yesterday, you might like that. Or if you want something a little more challenging, go ahead and look at those Khan Academy films. Hey, I just have to say, I really enjoyed teaching you math. I hope you enjoyed learning math as much as I enjoyed teaching it. And you have a wonderful summer. See you next year.